I just wanted some sauce on those zingers.
All right, everybody, welcome to the show. No, I am not streaming from a Motel 8, or did Howard Johnson still exist? Whatever. This is a secondary setup that's a work in process from Lauren's house. So going to have lights in the background. It's going to look a hell of a lot better than this, but I wanted to get this going so I could, well, one, use it and see how it actually worked. And it's working, which is great. So work in progress. Also, to a couple shameless plugs. Make sure you subscribe to Review Tech USA. Upload videos on a daily basis. And usually, when I don't have things going on behind the scenes, I stream on a fairly regular basis. So make sure you subscribe here, leave a like on the video, and also leave a comment. It helps out in the algorithm. Also, make sure to check out my ASMR channel called Tech25 ASMR. I'll have plenty of new content up on that channel this year. So make sure you subscribe to that channel as well. I'll have links to everything I mentioned below in the description and top pinned comment. So I actually made a video on this before. It kind of ties into what happened with Switch 2 sales, is that this past Black Friday in November was the worst sales wise for hardware since 1995. 1995. It was really bad because, listen, things are tough right now. Money is tight. And then on top of it, too, look at the Xbox Series consoles, which it's a dead generation for Microsoft now. Let's just keep it real. The prices of the consoles are going up. They're going up. They're not going down. So you have things like utilities, rent, mortgage, whatever. Things are more unaffordable. The basic necessities, food, too, that you need. All those things are less affordable, and you need those things. And then it's like, yeah, let me go spend hundreds upon hundreds of dollars on a console, and then you have to get games and accessories for it. And people are like, yeah, rather keep my lights on. So that's what's going on here. You know, you have more expensive hardware. You have people that money is tight and they're spreading their money thin. And it was a recipe for disaster. And even with like Black Friday sales, like the PS5, they did have discounts on the PS5. Even with that, it's still hurt numbers across the board. Yeah, if you look here, the PS5 sales, I have solid numbers here. We're down over 40% year over year. So when money is tight, people can't buy luxury items. And let's keep it real. Gaming and consoles and hardware are luxury items. And that's why we're seeing these numbers. These numbers are reflecting that people, their money is being spread very thin at the moment. And now let's talk about the Switch 2, which I'm not going to just make a bleak picture to rile people up. The Switch 2 has had a phenomenal first year out in the market. Nintendo's doing very well with the Nintendo Switch 2. But even with the Nintendo Switch 2 having all of this momentum, it still had a pretty bad, compared to the Switch 1 anyway, a pretty bad holiday season this year. This is the first year it's out of the market. This comes from videogameschronicle.com. I'll read it to you, then we'll discuss. Nintendo Switch 2 hardware sales slowed during the Christmas period compared to its predecessor in many Western markets, including the US and the UK. That's according to the Game Business, which reports that following a record-breaking launch earlier this year, Switch 2 sales in the US over the holiday period, November through December, were down around 35% compared with what the Switch 1 managed to sell during the same period in 2017. You also have to keep in mind with that too, it's not mentioned here, is that people were skeptical of the Switch. Nintendo was coming off of the Wii U, and it sold well. Obviously, the Switch 2 did phenomenal for Nintendo. It's now their best-selling console ever. Okay. But it was still like, all right, this is the same company that tried to give us the Wii U, and they had so much bad press because of that. And even though people were hyped for the Switch, there was a lot of concerns, like you're basically selling a tablet with controllers. That's how people thought at the time. Little do we know. You're selling a tablet with controllers, and that's your next console? How's this going to work out? So my point being is that now people love the Switch concept when the Switch 2 came out. When the Switch 1 came out, people were like, all right, it seems cool. I'm into it, but is Nintendo going to deliver? It's a much the mindset was much different then than it is now. So you have to tie that in, and that's why it should make the numbers somewhat more surprising to you. And in the UK, it kind of is the same story. Switch 2 sales for the last 8 weeks of the year were 16% lower than the Switch 1 in the same period of its life cycle, according to the Nielsen IQ data. But this is actually interesting. However, when the sales of the original Switch are included during this holiday season, so the Switch 1 and Switch 2, sales of Nintendo hardware were actually up 7% compared with the same period in 2017. Don't buy the Switch 1 in 2026. Just if you need to save money and wait. It's worth the wait for the jump in performance to the Switch 2. I'm actually surprised it made that much of a difference, the combined sales of the Switch 1 and Switch 2. Continuing on here, in France, Switch 2 sales in 2025 were 30% lower than that Switch 1 achieved in its first year, according to TGB, which is a surprise for a market that's typically one of Nintendo's strongest in Europe. But as you see here, when you add the total sales together and you look at the same time period for the Switch 1, which is the lighter gray line here, and the red line is the Switch 2. The Switch 2 is still killing it. So it may have had a tough holiday season compared to the Switch 1, but the Switch 2 is still doing huge numbers for Nintendo. Now, a senior employee told the game business that a complicated economic landscape, no kidding, higher price points, in the absence of a major Western game, that's actually a very good point, during Christmas made comparisons between the Switch 1 and Switch 2's opening Christmas periods difficult. So yeah, even Nintendo's admitting people can't afford games right now. It's really that simple. And the fact we didn't have like some like Dusk Bloods, which is being made by From Software for the Switch 2, out during the holiday season. Yeah, that it made it a tougher sell. Not saying there isn't plenty of software for the Switch 2, but it made it a tougher sell not having that must-have game like Dusk Bloods out in the market for people to buy with their console. And Mario Kart World, haven't played it in a while, but when I did play it, which was a while ago, admittedly, maybe they added a bunch more content, was a husk of a Mario Kart game. Not that I mean, the last Mario Kart game I truly enjoyed was Mario Kart 64, so maybe you can't go by me. But yeah, it left something to be desired. So there's that as well. So I know I'm kind of going in circles here, but it really all comes down to this is if people can't afford something, they can't buy it. If people can't buy something, it's going to affect the sales of a piece of hardware. If it affects the sales of a piece of hardware, well, then your numbers are going to be down. And the thing that is probably worrying, not just Nintendo, but Sony and, well, whatever the hell Microsoft's doing. Microsoft got outsold, the series consoles that got outsold by a Android-based Kinect clone console called the Next Playground. Leave a comment below when things settle down for me if you'd like to see a review of that. I think it might be very interesting. But it's just simple math that people, if they can't afford something, they can't buy it. And what's probably, like I said, concerning the hardware manufacturers now is usually even when times are tough, because there's discounts or because it's the holiday season, even if there isn't discounts, people end up buying more consoles. And we didn't see that this year. Console sales were down, which on a macro scale is kind of indicative of where the economy is right now beyond consoles. Gaming at one point, I remember when there was the Great Recession in the late 2000s and early 2010s, it was considered recession proof because you could buy a game and you could get tons of replay value out of it, which is still the same thing. But if you can't even afford to buy the game or the console that will give you that replay value because you need to pay your bills, well, then maybe gaming isn't that recession proof then. And what's happening with console sales and software sales in the industry right now is proof of that. This is Rich of Review Tech USA signing out. Have a good one. Again, let me know if you want me to do a video on that next player. I think it might be interesting. Or you might think it sucks. Let me know either way.